Today, you are pushing a large, heavy, square block. It resists every push. The corners drag. The ground is rough. Every centimeter of movement costs enormous effort. And you wonder, is this worth continuing? Am I strong enough? Am I the right person for this particular thing?
But you push again. And it moves. Slightly. A centimeter. 2.
And next week, you push again. And the block is slightly different. The corners have rounded slightly. The dragging is fractionally less. The same effort produces slightly more movement.
And the week after, slightly rounder still. Slightly less resistance. Slightly more movement for the same effort.
And in a month, the shape has changed substantially. The block is becoming a sphere. And a sphere, unlike a square block, does not need to be pushed with the same force. It rolls, with momentum, with a fraction of the effort the original block required.
And in a year, you are not pushing anymore. You are running alongside something that is moving under its own momentum. The sphere that you built through consistent small daily effort, it is carrying you forward faster than any single dramatic effort could have achieved.
This is what consistent small daily action produces. Not a dramatic transformation, not a moment of sudden change. A gradual, compounding, unstoppable momentum that builds invisibly, day by day, until one day you look back and realize what has been built.
And today, we show you exactly how this works. In your English, in your career, in your habits, in every area where you have been waiting for the big moment that will change everything.
Stay with us. Because the big moment you have been waiting for, it is not coming. But something far more reliable and far more powerful is available right now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Speak Unstoppable, the podcast where we help you speak English naturally and confidently through real, honest conversations.
I'm John.
And I'm Maria. So happy you're here with us today.
This episode is for B1 to B2 learners, intermediate to upper intermediate level English.
Before we continue, please subscribe to Speak Unstoppable right now. 1 tap. New episodes every single day. This is one small daily action you can take right now that will compound into something remarkable.
Subscribed? Good. Now let's talk about the most underrated and most reliably powerful force in any growth journey.
How are you feeling today, John?
Honestly, compounding, which is exactly the right feeling for today's topic. Thank you for being here. Let's go.
Okay, I want to ask you something.
Go ahead.
Think about the last time you tried to change something significant. A habit, a skill, an area of your professional or personal life. And think about how you approached it.
For most people, the approach is large, dramatic, total.
I am going to completely transform my daily routine. I am going to practice English for 90 minutes every day. I am going to fundamentally overhaul this area of my life, starting immediately.
And the effort begins with genuine commitment. Real motivation. Real intention.
And it is sustained for a few days, sometimes a few impressive weeks. And then, gradually, quietly, it collapses.
Not because the commitment was false, not because the desire was weak, but because the approach was built on a resource that is inherently unstable.
Motivation. Peak motivation. the elevated, excited state of a new commitment. And peak motivation, however genuine when it appeared, does not last. It rises. And it falls.
And the approach that required peak motivation to sustain, it falls with it.
And the conclusion most people draw? I am not disciplined enough. I do not want this enough. This is not possible for me.
But the conclusion is wrong. The approach was wrong.
Not the person. The approach.
Because the brain does not change through large, dramatic, peak motivation-dependent efforts. It changes through small, consistent, motivation-independent ones.
Today, that understanding. And the method that follows directly from it.
Let's start with the mathematics. Because the compounding of small daily actions is not an inspiring metaphor. It is a mathematical reality with measurable, verifiable outcomes.
A foundational question of compounding. If you improve by 1% every single day, 1% better at a skill or a habit, how much better are you at the end of 1 year?
Most people's intuitive answer is around 37%. Roughly 37 days times 1%.
The actual mathematically correct answer, you are 37.78 times better.
Not 37% better. 37 times better. That is 3,778% improvement from 1% per day sustained across a year.
And this is not a theoretical construct. This is how compounding actually functions. Small improvements, applied consistently, build on each other in a multiplicative rather than additive way.
Each day's improvement starts from a slightly higher base than the previous day. So the absolute size of each daily improvement grows, even when the percentage remains constant.
And this is the fundamental reason why consistency so dramatically outperforms intensity.
The person who practices English for 15 minutes every single day, 7 days a week, without exception, produces more linguistic development across a year than the person who practices for 90 minutes 3 times a week.
Even though the weekly total hours of the inconsistent practitioner are slightly higher.
Why? Because the daily practitioner's brain never allows the previous session's neural pathway strengthening to fade substantially before the next session reinforces it.
The pathway is reinforced daily. It strengthens cumulatively, without significant regression between sessions.
The less frequent practitioner's brain, even with longer sessions, begins each session from a slightly lower base than where the previous session ended, because the gap allows partial fade.
The compound is continuous for the daily practitioner, and discontinuous with periodic regression for the intensive but infrequent one.
The mathematics of compounding favor the consistent over the intensive. Every time. Without exception.
Okay. If small, consistent action is so powerfully superior, why do most people default to large, dramatic efforts? And why do they return to large, dramatic efforts every time the previous ones have failed?
3 specific reasons. And understanding all 3, it helps explain not just why people choose the wrong approach, but why the right approach feels so inadequate when you first begin.
Reason 1. The immediacy bias.
The brain has a strong preference for immediate feedback, immediate evidence that something is working. And large dramatic efforts, even when they are less effective, produce the feeling of proportionate effort.
If the desired change is significant, the effort should be significant. The brain associates the size of the effort with the seriousness of the commitment. And the seriousness of the commitment feels important to demonstrate.
But small, consistent actions, particularly in the early stages, produce no visible change. You cannot see the compounding on day 3, or day 15, or sometimes even day 45. The change is happening in the neural architecture, in the pathway strengthening, in the habit formation, but it is invisible at the surface.
And the brain, needing visible evidence that its investment is producing returns, registers the small action as insufficient, not commensurate with the scale of the desired change.
Even when mathematically the small, consistent action is building towards something far greater than the large, dramatic effort.
Reason 2. The identity signaling problem.
For many people, the size of the effort communicates commitment, and commitment communicates identity. I am someone who is serious about this, and my seriousness is demonstrated by the scale of my effort.
15 minutes of English practice per day does not feel like evidence of serious commitment to fluency. 2 hours per day feels like evidence of serious commitment.
But the commitment that actually produces fluency, the one that survives long enough for the compounding to produce results, is the one that can be sustained on the worst days, on the tired days, on the unmotivated days.
And 15 minutes survives those days. 2 hours frequently does not.
Reason 3. The motivation availability error.
Most people set the size of their daily action based on what they can do when motivation is high, when they are energized, when the commitment is fresh, when conditions are favorable.
But motivation is not a stable resource. It rises and falls with sleep, with health, with life demands, with the natural cycles of enthusiasm and fatigue that characterize real human experience.
And the action designed for high motivation conditions, it encounters the inevitable low motivation day. And it does not happen. And the momentum breaks.
And a broken momentum, like a broken compound, must be restarted from a lower base, with the additional psychological cost of having failed the previous commitment.
Design for the worst day, not for the best one. That is the principle that actually builds lasting change.
Let's examine the image more carefully, because it does not just show the endpoint, it shows the entire transformation sequence. And each stage has something specific to teach.
Today, the square block. And this is important to understand clearly. The square block is not a failure state. It is the accurate description of where every new skill, every new habit, every new practice begins.
At the start of any new behavioral pattern, the neural pathways required to support it do not yet exist, or they exist in a weak, underdeveloped form. Every instance of the new behavior requires full, deliberate attention, full, effortful engagement.
This is the square block. Not because you are insufficient, but because the neural infrastructure has not yet been built. And it cannot be built except through the repeated effort that builds it.
Next week, the rounded block. And this is the stage most people never reach, because this is the stage where the effort is still substantial, where the block is still heavier than you would like, but where the compounding has begun.
The edges are slightly smoother. The resistance is fractionally reduced, not enough to feel dramatic, not enough to notice day by day, but measurably present if you compare week 1 to week 2 directly.
The neural pathways have begun to strengthen. The behavior is beginning to require slightly less deliberate effort. The automation process has started, invisibly, beneath any surface evidence of change.
Next month, the sphere. And this is where the transformation becomes perceptible. The behavior that once required full, deliberate effort, it is becoming more natural, more automatic. The resistance that characterized the beginning substantially reduced.
This is the neural pathway reaching a threshold of strength where the behavior begins to operate more automatically, where the constant battle against inertia begins to ease.
In a year, you are running. The behavior is fully automated. The pathway is so well established that the behavior happens as a default rather than as a deliberate choice. The momentum maintains itself.
And the crucial insight about this entire transformation sequence: every stage is invisible except from a distance.
You cannot see the block becoming rounder day by day. The change happens beneath the surface, in the neural architecture, in the pathway strengthening that has no visible daily manifestation.
And most people, not seeing the daily change, conclude the process is not working. And they stop at the square block stage, or the rounded block stage, before the transformation reaches the threshold where it becomes visible and self-sustaining.
Trust the process even when you cannot see it working. Because the process is always working. The compound is always running, even when the daily evidence is invisible. Okay, English. Because this is the application that matters most to every listener of this podcast.
And the pattern of approach to English fluency, for most learners, perfectly replicates the large dramatic effort problem we have been describing.
I am going to study English seriously, starting now. I am going to watch English content for an hour every day. I am going to memorize vocabulary lists. I am going to speak only in English for the next 30 days.
And the effort begins with genuine commitment. And it sustains for a period. And then conditions change. Life demands increase. Motivation cycles through a trough. And the large effort does not happen on the difficult days.
And the conclusion? I am not good at languages. I do not have what it takes. English fluency is not realistic for someone like me.
But the conclusion is wrong. The approach was wrong.
Because English fluency, genuine, natural, automatic English, is built neurologically the same way any other complex skill is built. One consistent daily repetition at a time.
The 15-minute daily practice that never misses a day, it builds more fluency across a year than the 90-minute practice 3 times a week. And far more than the intensive month followed by months of nothing.
Because the 15-minute daily practice maintains the neural pathways continuously. The vocabulary encountered yesterday is re-encountered today, before it has faded. The grammatical pattern practiced yesterday is reinforced today, before regression can occur.
The compound is continuous, and continuous compounding at any level of intensity produces more total growth than discontinuous compounding at higher intensity.
And 15 minutes every day, on the worst day, the busiest day, the most tired day, 15 minutes is achievable. It survives the conditions that the larger commitment does not.
And English that is practiced every day without exception, it becomes a different kind of fluency than English that is practiced intensively with gaps.
It becomes automatic, reliable, present when you need it, not just in the conditions where you were sufficiently rested and motivated to complete the longer session.
This is the English the daily practitioner builds, and it is fundamentally different in feel, in automaticity, in genuine usability from the English built through inconsistent, intensive effort.
Okay, practical. How do you design the small daily action that will actually build the compound?
3 design principles, and all 3, they run counter to the intuitions that most people bring to this question.
Principle 1. Design for your worst day, not your best.
The question to ask is not, what can I do when I am at my best? What can I do when conditions are ideal?
The question is, what can I still do on the day when I am tired, when I have more demands than usual, when the last thing I want to do is this?
Because your best days will take care of themselves. On energized, motivated, time-available days, you will do more than the minimum. The minimum does not constrain the maximum.
But the minimum must survive the worst days, because the worst days are when the compound is most vulnerable. And maintaining the practice on the worst days is what separates the compound that builds from the compound that restarts.
Principle 2. Attach the action to something that already exists.
Implementation intentions. The when, where, and how of a specific plan produce dramatically higher follow-through than general intentions.
The general intention, I will practice English daily, relies on willpower and memory. It competes with every other demand for the available decision-making bandwidth of each day.
The implementation intention. Immediately after I finish breakfast, at the kitchen table, before checking my phone, I will listen to 10 minutes of English and repeat 3 phrases out loud. Requires neither willpower nor memory. It is triggered automatically by the existing behavior it is attached to.
The existing behavior, breakfast, is the cue. The new behavior, English practice, is the routine that follows the cue. And the pairing, practice consistently, becomes automatic. The existing habit carries the new one.
Principle 3. Measure the showing up, not the result.
In the early stages of compounding, the results are not visible. The block looks the same today as it did yesterday. The English does not feel different after 1 week of 15-minute sessions than it did before.
And if you measure the result, and the result is invisible, the measurement tells you the practice is not working, even when it is.
Measure the showing up instead. Did I practice today? Yes or no. That is the only metric that matters in the early stages, because showing up consistently is the only input required for the compound to operate.
And the compound, given consistent input, always produces output. The output is simply not visible at the timescale of individual days. It is visible at the timescale of months and years. And let's talk about one more thing. Something that is not about the mathematics or the neuroscience. Something about identity.
When you sustain a small daily action long enough for the compound to produce visible results, something happens that goes beyond the skill being built.
You become someone who builds things consistently. Someone who trusts the process. Someone whose relationship with growth is based on evidence, on the lived experience of having shown up consistently and seen what it produces.
And that identity, built through the accumulation of showing up, it is more valuable than any single skill it was applied to building.
Because it transfers. The person who learned to trust the compound in English they can apply the same trust to any other area of their life. The evidence is now experiential rather than merely conceptual.
I have seen the block become the sphere. I have felt the momentum build. I know what consistent small action produces because I have lived the production of it.
And that knowledge, experiential, embodied, genuinely earned, it is one of the most profound forms of self-confidence available.
Not confidence that comes from being told you can do something. Confidence that comes from having done something through a process you now understand and trust. Can I say something about what trusting the invisible compound actually requires?
Please.
It requires a specific kind of patience. Not passive patience, waiting for something to happen. Active patience.
The patience of continuing to do the right thing even when the evidence of its working is not yet visible. The patience of trusting the process because you understand the mechanism, not because you can see the results.
And this active patience, this continued showing up in the face of invisibility, it is one of the rarest and most valuable capacities a person can develop.
Most people stop at the square block because the square block does not look like it is becoming a sphere, because the block looks the same today as it looked last week.
But it is not the same. The edges are fractionally rounder. The neural pathways are fractionally stronger. The compound is running. Invisibly. Continuously. Reliably.
And the person who knows this, who continues showing up because they understand how compounding works, not because they can see it working, they are the person who eventually experiences the momentum that the person who stopped at the square block never reaches.
For English, this is the single most important mindset shift available.
Your English is compounding right now. Every episode you listen to, every phrase you attempt, every conversation you engage with, however imperfectly.
Even when you cannot feel it improving day by day, it is improving. The pathways are strengthening. The vocabulary is sedimenting. The grammatical patterns are becoming more automatic.
Keep showing up. Small, daily, consistent. And one day, without a specific moment of arrival, you will realize that the language is rolling under its own momentum, carrying you forward.
Remember this: you do not need the big dramatic moment. You need the small daily action, sustained long enough for the compound to do what it always does.
You do not need the big moment. You need the small daily action. Word tour time.
Word 1. Compound. To grow by building on previous gains in a multiplicative rather than additive way. Each period's improvement starting from a base that includes all previous improvements. Example 1. Small daily English practice compounds. Each session begins from a base that incorporates everything learned in all previous sessions. Example 2. The compound effect in language learning is why the daily practitioner who misses no sessions consistently outperforms the intensive practitioner with gaps, despite potentially fewer total hours.
Word 2. Momentum. The force of continuous forward movement that builds on itself. Increasing velocity from sustained motion rather than from individual bursts of effort. Example 1. Once the habit reaches the sphere stage, once the neural pathway is strong enough to operate somewhat automatically, momentum carries the practice forward with dramatically less effortful initiation. Example 2. Build English momentum carefully. It takes significant time to develop and is disrupted by extended gaps. Protect the daily practice because rebuilding momentum from zero is far more costly than maintaining it.
Word 3. Inertia. The tendency of something to remain in its current state unless acted upon by an external force. Resistance to change of any kind. Example 1. The square block represents maximum inertia. The behavior is new, the pathways are undeveloped, and every instance requires overcoming substantial resistance. Example 2. English inertia decreases with consistent practice. What once required deliberate, labored effort becomes progressively more automatic as the neural architecture develops.
Word 4. Sediment. To gradually settle into a stable, fixed position over time through repeated deposition. Example 1. Vocabulary sediments through repeated encounter. Each time a word is encountered in context, it settles fractionally deeper into long-term memory. Example 2. Grammar patterns sediment through repeated use, not through studied memorization, which is why production practice is neurologically more effective than rule memorization for developing automatic command of the language.
Word 5. Automaticity. The quality of happening without conscious thought or deliberate effort. The state of a skill that operates automatically. Example 1. The goal of consistent daily practice is automaticity, the point where the behavior requires so little deliberate effort that it feels natural rather than practiced. Example 2. English automaticity, the state where words and structures emerge without translation, without deliberate retrieval. It is built only through the accumulated repetitions of consistent daily use.
Word 6. Sustain. To maintain continuously over an extended period. To keep something going without interruption or collapse. Example 1. The crucial design question for any daily practice. Is this sustainable? Can I genuinely do this every day, in every season of life, under every condition? Example 2. Sustainable English practice looks different for different people, but it always shares one characteristic. It is small enough to do on the worst day of any given week.
One thing this week.
Design your daily English action using the 3 principles.
Principle 1. Make it small enough for your worst day, not your best. What can you do when you are exhausted, busy, and unmotivated?
Principle 2. Attach it to something that already happens every day. Immediately after breakfast. Immediately after morning coffee. Immediately after sitting at your desk.
Principle 3. Measure only the showing up, not the result. Did I do it today? Yes or no? That is the complete metric for this week.
Here is your sentence template.
My small daily English action is name your specific action. I am doing it immediately after. Name your existing habit. Even on my worst day, I can still do this. And I am starting today.
Say it out loud. With your real action. Your real trigger. Your real commitment.
My daily action is name it. My trigger is name it. I can do this even on my worst day. Starting today.
Mean every word. And then, today, do it. Comment challenge. What is your small daily English action? And what existing daily habit are you attaching it to?
Write using this sentence.
My small daily English action is write your action in the comments. I am attaching it immediately after. Write your trigger in the comments. Starting today. Not starting Monday. Today.
Write it. In English. In the comments. And then do it.
Because writing the public commitment, that is already the first showing up. And the first showing up is when the compound begins.
We read every comment.
Please give this a like.
New episode every single day on Speak Unstoppable.
Thank you for being here.
You do not need the big moment.
You need the small, daily action
Sustained long enough.
for the compound to do what it always does.
Bye, everyone.